I called her. Ma'am. The first time I saw her smile. It wasn't respect, not really, it was instinct. Something about the way she carried herself, the deliberate calm in her movements, made everyone else in the room feel like they were moving too fast. Her name was Elena. She worked 2 floors above mine, same building, same restless city hum. I'd been sent up with a folder, just another errand. She was standing near the window, light pooling behind her, half turned toward the skyline as if she didn't quite belong to the office around her. When she looked at me, it wasn't with curiosity. It was more like recognition. The kind that makes you forget what you came for. Leave it on the desk, she said softly, voice even but low enough to pull me closer. I should have left it and gone. But my hand hovered, pretending to straighten a stack of papers that didn't need straightening. She noticed. Of course she did. You're new here, she said. Yes, ma'am. The corner of her mouth lifted, just slightly. You don't have to call me that. Her eyes stayed on mine a second longer than they should have. That pause, the silence between her breath and mine, felt like something opening. The next few weeks were small collisions. Passing in the hallway, shared elevator rides, polite smiles that lasted too long. Every time, I told myself I imagined it. The way her gaze softened when she said my name. The way her hand brushed mine when she handed me a document. There was one afternoon, rain against the glass, the air thick with the scent of wet asphalt, when I found myself alone in her office again. She was sitting behind her desk, glasses low on her nose, reading something with quiet focus. I waited for her to look up. She didn't. So I spoke first. You always work through lunch? She didn't answer right away. Just took off her glasses, folded them carefully. Someone has to, she said, eyes finally lifting. And you? Don't you have somewhere else to be? Maybe, I said. But I'd rather be here. That made her laugh, soft, reluctant, like she didn't mean to let it escape. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because you're too young to mean them. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, but her tone made it sound final. So I didn't. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't cold either. It was the kind of silence that waits for someone to be brave enough to break it. She turned back to her papers, but her hand stayed close to the edge of the desk, inches from mine. I watched her fingers, steady, elegant, slightly trembling as they brushed against the surface. I didn't touch her. But I didn't move either. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far away. Do you ever stop thinking? She asked suddenly, still looking at the papers. Not when I'm here. Her lips parted, just enough to let a quiet breath escape. Then she looked up, finally meeting my eyes unguarded. For a heartbeat, everything went still. The hum of the air conditioner, the ticking clock, even the rain, all of it seemed to fade. And then, someone knocked. She blinked, the spell breaking. Come in, she said, voice steady again. I stepped back, pretending to adjust the folder I'd already delivered. But when the door opened and the moment vanished, she glanced at me once more, something unspoken lingering there. A look that said this wasn't over. Not yet. It started happening without intention. I'd find reasons to pass by her floor, drop-offs, follow-ups, anything that justified seeing her again. And she never told me to stop. Elena was careful, though. Always professional when others were around. But when it was just us, something softened in her. The way her voice dropped, the way she'd hold eye contact just long enough to make it hard to breathe. Once, late in the day, she asked me to stay while she finished a report. I could use another set of eyes, she'd said, though she barely looked at the document. I stood beside her desk, watching her read, her hand occasionally brushing her neck as she thought. That small gesture, absent-minded, graceful, did something to me I couldn't explain. She caught me looking. What? She asked, without looking up. Nothing, I said too quickly. Her lips curved faintly. You're not good at hiding it. I laughed, trying to recover. Hiding what? Her eyes flicked toward me, steady, assessing. Curiosity. She went back to her papers, pretending that ended it. But it didn't. That night, I couldn't stop replaying her tone, half amusement, half warning. Over time, fragments of her life slipped through our guarded conversations. A divorce a few years back. No children. She didn't say much about it, only that things fade, and sometimes you let them. I told her about leaving school early, about the quiet pressure of trying to make something of myself before anyone expected much. She listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel older than I was. Do you ever regret it? She asked once, eyes on her coffee. Sometimes, I admitted. But not today. Her fingers tightened slightly around the mug, and she didn't ask what I meant. It became our rhythm, these almost conversations, hovering between confession and retreat. One afternoon, she stood behind me as I typed something for her, leaning close to check the screen. I could feel her breath, warm against the side of my neck. Here, she murmured, pointing at the monitor, her fingertip grazing the back of my hand. It wasn't deliberate, I think. But neither of us moved. For a second, the whole world narrowed to that single touch, the faint pressure of her skin, the quiet hum of the computer fan, the uneven rhythm of our breathing. Then she pulled away abruptly, her chair scraping softly against the floor. That's fine, she said too fast. Thank you? I nodded, trying to find my voice. Of course, ma'am. She exhaled, slow, measured. Then, almost under her breath, don't call me that. The silence after was heavier than before, filled with things neither of us dared name. When I left her office that evening, she didn't look up. But as I reached the door, her voice followed, low and steady. Noah. I turned. She didn't say anything else. Just held my gaze, a faint tremor in her jaw. And that was enough. For the first time, she'd said my name like it mattered. It was supposed to be a simple late-night task, checking through client files before the deadline. Everyone else had gone home. The office was quiet in that heavy way that makes every sound feel too loud. Elena was standing by the printer when I walked in, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair slightly undone from the long day. She looked less like my superior and more like someone caught between exhaustion and something softer. You're still here? She asked, half smiling. Couldn't leave you to suffer alone. She gave a quiet laugh, shaking her head. You shouldn't keep saying things like that. I mean them, I said before I could stop myself. That made her pause. The air between us tightened. She turned back to the printer, pretending to adjust the paper tray, though her hands moved slower than necessary. You don't understand what this looks like, she said quietly. What it could mean. Maybe I don't care what it looks like. Her shoulders tensed. She didn't turn around. You should. The machine beeped, an abrupt, mechanical reminder of reality. She reached for the papers, but one slipped to the floor. I bent to pick it up at the same time she did. Our hands brushed. Neither of us moved. Her fingers lingered over mine just long enough for something inside me to stumble. I looked up, and she was already watching me, eyes soft but uncertain, lips parted like she might say something and couldn't. And then the door opened. A voice, Mark, from accounting, broke the silence. Oh, hey, Elena. Didn't realize anyone was still here. We jumped apart like guilty kids. She recovered first. Just wrapping up, she said smoothly. Noah was helping with the reports. Mark nodded, oblivious, grabbed his jacket, and left with a casual wave. The door clicked shut behind him. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. The printer hummed, filling the silence. Then she laughed, a soft, shaky sound. That was close. I wanted to laugh too, but my heart was pounding too hard. You're shaking, I said quietly. I'm not, she whispered, though her voice betrayed her. I reached out without thinking, my hand brushing her arm. She froze. Her skin was warm under my fingers. The kind of warmth that makes you forget you're not supposed to reach for it. This isn't fair to you, she said, voice barely audible. Then tell me to stop. She looked at me, really looked, and I saw every war she was fighting with herself. You think I haven't tried? The lights above us flickered once, the hum of the building swallowing the quiet. We stood there, too close, too aware. The papers lay forgotten on the desk. I could feel the pull, the breath between us tightening like a thread that could snap with the smallest movement. But she stepped back first. Just an inch. Enough to make it hurt. "Go home, Noah," she whispered. I didn't move. Neither did she. And in that unspoken space between leaving and staying, something irreversible took root. The storm had started before sunset, low thunder, wind pressing against the windows like it wanted in. The office had emptied early, but Elena stayed behind. So did I. Neither of us mentioned why. She was sitting by the window again, the city lights glimmering in the wet glass. I brought her a cup of coffee, mostly as an excuse to stand close. She looked up, her hair falling loose from its usual neat twist. "Thank you," she said, voice softer than the rain outside. "You should go home before it gets worse," I murmured. "I could say the same to you. I don't think you'd mean it." She exhaled, a quiet laugh mixed with something like defeat. "You really don't know when to stop, do you? Not when it comes to you." That broke her composure. For the first time, she didn't look away. Her hand moved, hesitant, deliberate, and took the cup from me, her fingers brushing mine. The small contact sent a shiver through both of us. Her gaze dropped to the space between us. "You're making this harder than it already is." "Then stop pretending it's easy," I said. She shook her head, but there was no conviction left in it. "You're too young to understand how quickly this can destroy things." "Maybe," I said, stepping closer. "But I know what I feel when I'm near you." The air grew tight. Every sound, the rain, the thunder, our breathing, seemed to fold inward. She didn't move as I reached up, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. My fingertips grazed her cheek. Her eyes fluttered shut for a second, long enough for me to see the tremor in her lips, the hesitation that wasn't really hesitation anymore. "Noah," she whispered, voice breaking around my name. "Tell me to stop," I said again, almost pleading. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned forward, just enough that her forehead rested against mine. I could feel her breath, uneven, warm, carrying every word she couldn't say. "You don't know what you're asking for," she whispered. "I do," I breathed back. "I've known since the first day." A tear, or maybe a raindrop, slid down her cheek. I caught it with my thumb, and her hand came up to hold mine there. She was trembling. So was I. We stayed like that, suspended, her lips inches from mine, the taste of rain in the air, the weight of every unspoken word pressing down. Then, somewhere down the hall, a door slammed. We jumped apart, startled back into the world. She turned toward the window, hand covering her mouth, as if hiding what almost happened. "I can't," she started, but her voice faltered. When she looked at me again, her eyes were wet, fierce. "You shouldn't have come tonight." I took a slow step toward her, voice low. "But I did." The thunder rolled again, closer this time. And for the first time, she didn't tell me to leave. The next morning, she didn't come in. Her office lights stayed off all day, her chair empty. I told myself she probably needed the break. That last night had shaken her too. But by the third day, the waiting turned into worry. I found her in the small cafe across the street, sitting alone at the far end near the window. She looked different out of the office, hair loose, no makeup, a wool sweater that made her seem softer and somehow even further away. I hesitated before approaching, but she looked up first. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "You've been avoiding me." She didn't deny it. "I needed time." I sat across from her anyway. "Time for what?" "To remember who I'm supposed to be." There was a pause, long enough for the hum of the espresso machine to fill the silence. Then she sighed, setting down her cup. "You should know something." Her tone made my stomach tighten. She looked out the window, avoiding my eyes. "Someone saw us that night. The cleaning staff. Mark heard them talking. He came to me yesterday." I felt my throat go dry. "What did you tell him?" "The truth," she said, but her voice trembled on the word. That nothing happened. Did he believe you? I don't know. The noise around us faded, the clatter of dishes, the dull chatter, until all I could hear was my heartbeat. She finally looked at me then, her eyes tired but clear. You need to understand, Noah. This isn't just about us. I've worked here for years. If people start to talk, I don't care about them. Well, I do, she snapped, louder than she meant to. Heads turned briefly before she lowered her voice again. You think this is simple? You think it's just about wanting someone? Her hands were trembling. I reached out, instinctively, but she pulled back before I could touch her. I'm sorry, I said softly. I didn't mean to make things harder. You didn't, she murmured, finally meeting my eyes again. I did. For a moment, everything stopped moving. Her words hung there between us, too heavy to ignore. What do you mean? She exhaled, voice unsteady. You weren't the only one who stayed that night because you didn't want to leave. I stared at her, trying to read what she wasn't saying. Then she reached for her bag, brushing past me as she stood. Her sleeve grazed my hand, a small, electric touch that said more than her words ever could. Outside, the rain had started again. She stopped by the door, not looking back. I told myself I'd keep this professional, she said softly. But every time I see you, it gets harder to remember why. I stood, heart pounding. Then don't remember. She didn't turn around. Just whispered, You have no idea what that would cost me. And then she left, leaving the door swinging slowly behind her, the air still carrying her perfume and a decision neither of us could take back. She came back to work 3 days later. Nothing looked different, but everything felt changed. The moment I saw her, standing in her office doorway, pretending not to notice me, I knew we'd already crossed whatever line there was. The silence between us said more than any apology could. That evening, when most people had gone, she called my name. Noah, can you close the door? I did. Slowly. She was by her desk, hands gripping the edge like she needed it to stay grounded. This can't go on, she said. You mean us? Her jaw tightened. There is no us. Then why can't you look at me when you say that? Her breath caught, just slightly. You're not being fair. Neither are you. I took a step closer. She didn't move. Elena, I said softly. That broke something. She looked up, eyes glassy, voice shaking. You don't understand what this does to me. Then explain it. She shook her head, blinking fast. I've spent years keeping things steady, safe. And then you walked in, and suddenly I don't know who I am anymore. Her confession hit me harder than I expected. I moved closer until I could feel the warmth of her body against mine, though we weren't touching yet. You think I haven't felt the same? I whispered. The air grew thick, breath shallow, words falling away. I could see the pulse in her throat, the trembling of her hands as they loosened from the desk. She reached up, fingertips grazing my chest, hesitant but certain. This isn't supposed to happen, she murmured. Maybe it already has. Her hand stilled over my heart, and for a moment, all we did was breathe. The sound of rain returned outside, soft against the windows. It felt like the world was holding its breath with us. I brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. She leaned into the touch, eyes fluttering shut. Elena, I started, but she stopped me with a whisper. Don't say my name like that, she said, voice barely there. How should I say it? Her eyes opened slowly, meeting mine. Like you mean it. And just like that, the space between us disappeared. She leaned in, not fast, not desperate, just honest. My hand found her face. Hers slid to the back of my neck. For a suspended moment, we hovered there, one breath apart, everything trembling on the edge. Then, finally, she kissed me. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't smooth. It was real, unsteady, too long delayed, full of everything we'd been holding back. The years between us, the fear, the wanting, all of it melted into that one fragile connection. When she pulled away, her forehead stayed against mine. Her voice came out low, trembling. Now you know. I always did, I whispered. For the first time, either of us looked away. The fear was still there, but it didn't matter anymore. We both understood what we'd chosen: messy, reckless, inevitable. And it was enough. The rain finally stopped by morning. The city woke up pale and quiet, like it didn't want to disturb what had happened the night before. Elena's apartment was smaller than I imagined. Warm light, old books stacked by the window, a faint smell of coffee and rain-soaked air. I hadn't meant to follow her home, but when she turned and said, "Come in," there hadn't been room for hesitation. Now we sat on the couch, a quiet between us that felt different. Not tense, just full. She held her mug in both hands, watching the steam rise. Her hair was damp, her sweater loose at the collar. Every detail of her looked softer in this light, more real. "Do you regret it?" I asked finally. Her fingers tightened slightly around the cup. "Not the way you think," she said. I don't know what comes next." I nodded, leaning back. "Me neither." That made her smile, small, genuine. "We make a fine pair, then." I reached out, brushing my thumb over the back of her hand. She didn't pull away this time. For a moment, she just looked at our hands, hers elegant, mine rougher, younger. Then she turned her palm to fit against mine, fingers lacing together. It was such a simple thing, but it felt like an answer to every question we hadn't asked. "You keep surprising me," she said softly. "I think you like that." She laughed under her breath. "I shouldn't." "But you do." She shook her head, pretending to scold me, but her thumb traced slow circles over my skin. The kind of small, absent movement people make when they stop trying to hide how they feel. The window behind us glowed faintly with the early light. Outside, the street still glistened, puddles catching bits of sunrise. "I was afraid of this," she admitted. "Of feeling seen again. It's easier not to." I turned toward her. "You don't have to hide anymore." She looked at me for a long moment, and something in her face eased. All the restraint, all the fear, it slipped just enough for me to see the woman underneath. Then she leaned forward, resting her forehead against mine. We stayed like that, breathing the same quiet air. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "You make me forget how old I am." I smiled. "You make me forget how young I am." Her laugh was soft, tired, beautiful. "That's not nothing." "No," I said. "It's everything." Outside, the city began to move again, the low hum of traffic, a bus passing, the distant call of a vendor setting up for the day. Life returning, ordinary and unstoppable. But for once, neither of us felt the need to rush back into it. She leaned into me, her head resting against my shoulder. I wrapped an arm around her, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing against my chest. No words. No explanations. Just the quiet certainty that, for now, this was enough. And maybe, finally, that was all either of us had been looking for. By the time morning light spilled through the blinds, the world outside had gone quiet again. The storm had passed, leaving that soft stillness that only comes after everything's been said and undone. Elena stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching drops of water slide down the glass. She looked calm, though I could tell her mind was somewhere else, running over the same thoughts I was too afraid to say aloud. When she finally spoke, it wasn't what I expected. "I thought I'd wake up and regret it," she said, not turning around. "But I don't." I smiled faintly. "You sound surprised." "I am," she admitted, glancing back at me. "Because it's been a long time since I've wanted something this much, and even longer since I let myself have it." I moved to stand beside her, close enough to feel the warmth from her body. The window reflected us both, her graceful, steady presence beside my uncertain one. And somehow, it looked right. "People will talk," she said. "They already do." That made her laugh quietly. "You're impossible." "Maybe. But I'm still here." She turned to me then, eyes soft but searching. "You don't feel strange about this? About us?" I did. I said honestly. At first, I thought maybe I was chasing something I didn't understand. But now, I think I was just trying to find someone who saw me the way you do. Something in her expression shifted, like the words landed somewhere deep, somewhere she didn't expect to feel again. She reached out, tracing a fingertip along my jaw. You shouldn't say things like that, she whispered. Why not? Because I'll believe you. I caught her hand before she could pull away, pressing it lightly to my chest. Then believe me. Her breath hitched, but she didn't move. I leaned forward, brushing my lips against her forehead, a slow, quiet gesture that said more than any promise could. When she exhaled, her shoulders finally relaxed, her body leaning into mine. The coffee cooled in her forgotten hand. My arms slipped around her waist, drawing her closer until the only sound between us was the faint rhythm of our breathing. The world outside kept moving, cars passing, people starting their day, but inside that small apartment, time felt suspended. I don't know where this goes, she said softly. Then we'll find out together. She smiled against my chest, a real smile this time, one that reached her eyes. You make it sound easy. It's not, I said. But it feels right. We stood like that for a while, no need for words, no need to hide. Just two people who had stopped pretending the rules mattered more than the truth. When she finally looked up at me again, there was no hesitation left, just warmth and quiet certainty. Her fingers laced through mine. Then stay, she said simply. And I did. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?